Captain's Log, Supplemental. Cadet Tanaka, one of our new crew members currently on rotation in our science program, has been working with the Denna that were brought on board several weeks ago. Tanaka thought they looked remarkably similar to ferrets from Earth. It takes some imagination, but I can see what she means. They seem to have the same predilection for shiny things that ferrets do too. Tanaka's been using glass beads with them as a reward system. Lieutenant Davis was wondering how the little creatures kept breaking out of their enclosures overnight. Turns out Denna perform a trick akin to quantum tunneling at macroscopic levels. Unnerving as all get out to see in person. They had their first adventure outside the science lab last night. Tanaka woke up to the lion's share of the crew's communicators littered all over the floor of her quarters this morning. Clever little thieves seem to have bonded with her.
Welcome, everybody, to Captain's Log Supplemental. I am Chris Emmerich. With me, as always, is Robert Beach.
That's not my name.
I'm making it your name. I was in between Rob and Robertson.
That's very rude.
Anyway, Rob Beach.
Hello.
And Stanford, who just goes by Stanford.
Yeah, I'm enigmatic that way.
You're like a Brazilian soccer player.
Yes, in every single way.
Would you say he's the Pele of Star Trek Rewatch podcast? So just to give you all a rundown of what we're doing here, as I just mentioned, this is a rewatch podcast. However, we are going in chronological order. That means we are starting with Star Trek Enterprise. Today's show is Enterprise, part 1 and 2, Broken Bow. It's a 2-part first episode, so we'll be doing the first part here today, and our next episode will be the second part to close it out. I guess with that, we will just go ahead and get started. The first episode opens with Archer's a child talking to his father, kind of a flashback memory, has that nice sepia filter on there, and talking about how they're getting ready to build the ship and sprinkling in casual racism about Vulcans.
Oh, so much casual racism right off the bat.
They did not wait.
So after that little cold open to kind of give you the introduction to, Archer, we kind of cut to the future where we're seeing a crashed Klingon ship. And, where else do we start but cornfield in the middle of, I assume, the Midwest. It looked very Midwesty.
Yeah, that seems like a safe assumption. It was flat.
Yeah. Well, yeah, sure. As a Missouri resident, I can confirm very flat here. So the Klingon is running through the cornfield from the unknown alien race at this point, anyway, and decided to hide in a silo. The aliens chasing him get all shapeshiftery and squeeze into the door, and some just fantastic CGI. Really holds up well to the test of time. Don't you guys agree?
I thought it was a practical effect. It was so good.
It's the peak of the early 2000s right there.
Yeah, what did this show? Oh, 2001. That's right, 2001.
2001, yeah. So the Klingon cleverly bails out of the silo and explodes it, killing the other aliens. He's then happened upon by the hapless human farmer who tries to communicate briefly and then just starts blasting. So anyway, he started blasting. The Klingon goes down, and we cut to Faith of the Heart.
Masterpiece. Masterpiece. I just want to take a moment to point out that I think it is an unassailable opinion that this is the greatest Star Trek opening theme song that has ever been written.
If by greatest ever you mean worst of all time, that it is the greatest at being the worst, for sure.
So, did you know that song, and this might be me sounding like an idiot because I often am when it comes to music. Did you know that song existed prior to the show? Like, that song was not written for this show.
I had never heard it before this show, so no.
Yeah, it's like a Rod Stewart song.
It makes me feel a little better about it, but like it just screams late 80s, early 90s TV to
I say
me.
somehow that makes it worse, though. Like, they knew what this song sounded like and then chose it for Star Trek.
It reminds me of Baywatch.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very... Yeah. I will say it is also the only intro song with vocals in a Star Trek series.
Which, at the time, was quite the ado, I remember. People were like, you can't have vocals. Huh. You gotta have some
Bring in the theremin.
Swelling orchestra, and you gotta fly through a comet. That's how you make an opening to a Star Trek.
And rightly, they have gone back to that in the newer series.
Both of those things, yes.
Yeah. So after the lovely intro video, we get a little Archer and Trip inspection of the new ship that don't really get even a full picture of it at this point. They're just kind of flying below it. So we see the underside of it. They talk about how, it's going warp 4.5 so fast. Oh my God. Neptune and back in 6 minutes, which is like a very, the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs quote.
I mean, 6 minutes sounds pretty fast to me.
It's faster than it takes light to get from the sun to Earth.
Well, I mean, it is faster than light travel, so that stands to reason.
Yeah.
After that little inspection, we cut to Starfleet Medical, where the Vulcans and humans are, as a theme for this first season, are butting heads. That's kind of what they do. Just as a brief aside, they've used the next generation Klingons here, and there's the ones that were in Deep Space Nine and Voyager and all that as well. Which is kind of interesting because we have next generation style Klingons in this, and then in Discovery we have totally weird Klingons.
I forgot about the hair thing.
Yeah. The hair thing. Anyway, so the Klingon is carrying crucial information. The Klingons are demanding his immediate return, even if he's dead. Maybe preferably that way. Klingons in their honor. The Vulcans want to push off the launch of the Enterprise, which, by the way, we're also introduced to the eventual doctor of the Enterprise, Phlox. We get some foreshadowing of conflicts with the Klingons. Maybe that won't happen in Enterprise, but later in the Star Trek timeline. The Vulcans want to basically euthanize the injured Klingon in respect of the Klingons' wishes, and Archer gets very, I know better. I'm a doer. I do things.
That'll be a pattern.
Yeah,
a theme for this show.
Yeah. So anyway, Archer threatens to punch T'Pol in a clear show of totally not being exactly what the Vulcans think humans are. So really, the perfect example of how much better they are than the Vulcans think they are. Anyway, as expected, the humans say fuck off to the Vulcans, and they're going to do what they want. They're going to launch the Enterprise.
Which, to be fair to the humans, having thought about this and seen this episode a couple of times now, I don't think the Vulcans had a real strong reason to not let the Enterprise launch.
No, I agree.
This incident didn't really affect their mission at all.
No, it was definitely an excuse the Vulcans were using.
Yeah, because as much as I'm usually the humans are full of shit, I think in this case they actually did have a point. Why are we delaying this mission?
This one time.
This is the one they get. We get a little introduction to the helmsman Travis Mayweather and the weapons officer Malcolm Reed. We're introduced to the transporter as a not quite ready for prime time technology. There's kind of some questions about whether or not it'll work right. We get some more xenophobia, this time about Klingons. Malcolm is kind of reinforced as the stick in the mud character of the crew. Outside of T'Pol, who's just Vulcan in that way, but we get down to back to Earth, and Archer is recruiting the communications officer, Hoshi Sato, who is for some reason teaching outside in a tank top and shorts.
Yeah, I love the this is what future college is going to look like.
It's very relaxed.
Casual Fridays.
She doesn't want to go, but Archer's trying to convince her. Then Archer plays some Klingon noises, and Sato gets, kind of etymology horny for it and is on board. So we've kind of got our overview of the crew out of the way. We go back to the Enterprise, and Archer and Trip are grumbling about having to take T'Pol along. Rebel. Of course, T'Pol comes in and is a pretty big dick to Archer and Trip. So, I mean, I get it, I guess.
There's like some very strong older sibling, younger sibling energy going on between the Vulcans and the humans right now.
For sure. Yeah. Definitely a very apt description of the relationship that's being portrayed there. Or at least, if not that, then, parent and child. Stupid kid wants to go running around. Anyway, we eventually get to the launch of the Enterprise. In true Star Trek pilot show tradition, we bring back some previous Star Trek characters. In this case, there's obviously not that many to choose from, so we get
just
Cochrane.
One. Yep.
Just the one. We get Zefram Cochrane, who, rolls out the nice quote of seeking out new life and new civilizations and boldly going. We get our first full look at the NX-01.
Is that the first time? I bet it is. Is that the first time where like the writers of a show went ahead and put a backstory into something no one cared about? Like, we didn't need to know who came up with that line in the Star Trek universe.
Yeah, I think, because this show was going to be so different, I feel like they probably felt like they had to try to kind of like,
it's just
make
like
those links.
It's just like, it's like in the Solo movie where it's like, oh, this is the backstory behind how he got the dice in the fucking Millennium. Like, we don't care. It's fine. They could have just been there. We don't need an explained backstory.
Yeah.
It's a fun throwback for fans, though. Like, as far as fan service goes, it's relatively innocuous.
I agree. Yeah. Plus,
Paul is plenty of fan service.
Well, that's a different kind of fan service. So Archer's, engage command for their first initial launch is "Let's go," which I think sets the tone for how underwhelming his captaincy is in this show. I mean, just very milquetoast, not iconic in any way, shape, or form. Just meh. After the launch scene, we kind of get our view of the enemy, so to speak. We get to this mysterious chamber and the alien, and it's a Suliban. I don't think I'm not sure if they say it in the name of that species in the episode or not, but is talking to this mysterious figure about the failure of capturing the Klingon and asking him to fix his friend dying. So it's kind of being hinted at for the first time that time travel is going to be have a big part in this storyline. Which, time travel is... We might talk about that another time. We get back to the Enterprise and sickbay, and Phlox is talking about his medical menagerie of weird creatures and things he uses to heal people. We get to see Phlox's creepy ass smile for the first time, like just gross. And I love Phlox as a character, but good God, that smile!
It's the smile that just keeps getting bigger and bigger until it's really uncomfortable to look at. I will say though, I appreciate his love of Chinese food.
Yeah, he does enjoy it. We after a little bit of upside down time with Mayweather and Trip, we go to another common theme for the show is moving the story along while people are eating. I'm 90% sure it happens at least once an episode.
Oh my God, I didn't even think did we mention that before? Well, no, this is our first episode, so no, we did not mention it before.
This is totally not a re-recording of an episode because our audio got messed up the first time.
I didn't think about the fact that there's just always somebody fucking eating in this show.
Mm-hmm. So Paul gets annoyed with the human num-nums and... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, one thing I didn't realize, and I think we talked about this in another session. Are replicators not a thing at this point in Star Trek history?
They definitely are.
That's a great question. I gather that they are, but they're not real good yet because they talk about how things taste like resequenced proteins and
Right,
shit.
I was going to say, they definitely mention for sure resequenced proteins, but I guess it's just...
Well, yeah, like Trip at one point says to thank the chef.
Yeah, there is a chef in this.
There is definitely a chef.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, and the captain, this is that like U.S. naval thing that kind of happens, but like the captain has his own table and the chef cooks the captain's table like a special meal.
Okay.
So after our little num-num scene and, T'Pol saying more about humans aren't ready to go exploring, and, fuck T'Pol because we're going to do what we want. We get a little work test going. T'Pol butts heads with Hoshi briefly because Hoshi is very whiny and nervous about everything.
Literally everything. I do not like how her character was presented in the beginning of this show.
Yeah, it definitely gets better later on.
It does. She gets some confidence. And I understand like having a character like lack confidence, but I think they stereotyped it. Yeah. I think they made her sound very, like, to use an old, pretty offensive term, like they make her sound hysterical.
Yes.
In a like very stereotypical way that I do not think does any service to the character whatsoever.
Yeah, agree.
Because I actually like the character, especially as she gets written a little better towards the end of the show.
I agree, 100%. The Klingon wakes up finally in sickbay, and so Hoshi then goes down to try to start translating. There's a very chuckle-worthy Stinky Boots comment, and then the power goes out, and we get a little horror movie vibes going here. The Suliban board the Enterprise. They hit their active camo and get all ceiling-y.
Right. Because like, how like you cannot possibly react to something that is actually on a ceiling instead of like right in front of you.
Right.
It's impossible. Like, it's a perfect strategy.
Definitely.
And living in an environment and living in a low gravity environment, things never wind up on the ceiling.
Yeah. In corridors that are 8 feet high at the most.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really tremendous advantage to be on the ceiling.
It's incredible they didn't just take over the whole Enterprise right then and there, being on the ceiling like that.
As a interesting aside, the Suliban are actually named after the Taliban, although this was actually written before 9/11 happened.
Yep.
So it was
weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's weird to you because we are young. And this is where my poli-sci kind of plays off. Like, the Taliban were a threat way before 9/11 threat. Let's be real. The Taliban were a non-government actor in the world prior to 9/11. The Taliban are who took responsibility.
The 80s, right?
Yes, because I mean they've been around in Afghanistan, and we've been fighting proxy wars in Afghanistan for like 200 years at this point. And yeah, during the 80s, it was against the Russians, right? But like, do you remember, you don't remember because none of us do, but like, do you remember hearing about like the World Trade Center bombing?
Mm-hmm.
Like where they blew up the basement of the World Trade Center? Like that was also the Taliban.
Oh.
I believe Osama bin Laden was actually involved in that as well.
So, the name definitely took on a more sinister, feeling for the Suliban, that is, seeing as I think did this air after 9/11?
Yes,
no?
So that's a good point. This aired September 26th, 2001. Yeah. So I'm actually surprised they let this continue to air because they canceled a lot of movies and shit that year.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe because they were bad guys.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, and it's also Star Trek, so maybe they just thought it was like separated enough that people.
It was far enough away, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, the Suliban are boarding, and they take the Klingon, who at this point we've learned name is Clang. However, they do manage to shoot and kill one of the Suliban. Which leads us to a little. Well, first, actually, I forgot. First, they go to engineering, and Paul is arguing that the mission is over now because Clang is gone, and Captain gets, casually racist again in the captain's quarters, talking about bury your cynicism like your repressed emotions. But Phlox discovers that there's, genetic engineering going on for the Suliban.
No shit.
believe it or not, they can't do all these things on their own. So after some more patronizing from T'Pol, Hoshi finishes translating the identity of the Suliban, and they identify the Suliban ship to follow. And they've discovered that it goes to, I forget, what was it that they did? They revealed they were able to identify the Suliban ship, and then T'Pol, that's right, T'Pol reveals some info that she already knew and was kind of holding back about Rigel. And they make their way there, which I thought was interesting.
Rigel is where the trade station is?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But the Vulcans kind of knew about it a little bit already, and she was kind of holding back the information.
Yeah, I mean, that might as well happen. Like, why not at this point?
Sure. Mm-hmm. So anyway, they arrive at Rigel, and T'Pol gives everybody the rules about
anything speech.
Don't go down there and fuck the aliens. It's not allowed. And I mean, in her defense, humans always be fucking aliens. So,
and they all were. Although, if I recall correctly, that sequence definitely does that early 2000s lingering on the menfolk as she says this, when she's like, don't worry about Hoshi, she's just a girl, she's not gonna fuck all the aliens.
Mm-hmm. So of course the first place they go is an alien strip club. That's where you find all the best information, with sexy frog tongue ladies, eating butterflies as you do. Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't that be the first place you go when you're searching for, an organization that's, stealing people and boarding military ships? That is definitely where they would hide out. After some more of that action, they kind of break off into groups and start searching. Trip and T'Pol are kind of grouped together, and Trip gets very, humanly concerned about bystanders he knows nothing about.
The little kid with the...
Right, they're trying to wean him off. Mm-hmm, they're trying to wean him off that stuff.
Are Trip and T'Pol in line at the DMV in this scene? Where are they? It feels like they're in a government office.
It does, yeah, for sure. I don't know what they were doing. Presumably just walking around looking for strange things, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess maybe that's a symptom of some fairly cheap and primitive set technology back then. But it's very are we just in a room with these people? What is happening right now?
Mm-hmm. It's the security line of the TSA.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So Archer and Hoshi are paired together. And they're searching, I don't know, a back alley oil rig or something. I don't know. It's very industrial looking, and they get ambushed and taken captive. And with no other explanation, they are also thrown in a jail cell with Trip and T'Pol, who I guess were captured at some point, even though they didn't show anything about that at all.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that is where our first part of the Broken Bow ends. On that little cliffhanger. So, I guess, I guess too, they didn't actually, I kind of tiptoed into the next little episode, because I guess I forgot they don't actually show them, T'Pol and Trip, until the next part starts. So, but.
Alrighty. Well, then we're going to take a quick break. We will be right back with your diving deep there, Chris.
All right, welcome back, everybody. This is our second portion of the podcast, where we will be talking kind of diving into the theme, some type of theme or topic from the episode. In this case, I kind of wanted to discuss Star Trek pilot episodes and what your thoughts on those are. Generally, they're terrible. Let's be honest here.
Oh, come on. There's the one where Spock shouts all of his lines. Let's see. The one where Data whistles and the holodeck doesn't work right. Cisco showed up and then got abducted by an hourglass.
What was the first episode of Voyager?
The caretakers. The caretakers and the what is Chakotay's little faction called?
Maquis.
The Maquis. That's right. Thank you. Yes, they're chasing the Maquis to the caretaker station, and then they get blasted across to the Delta Quadrant.
You know, it took like a full 2 or 3 episodes of watching Voyager for me to realize they weren't saying Marquis. Like, I thought that they were making some hierarchical reference that I just didn't understand.
Yeah, the Maquis. The Maquis, who are a fascinating entity inside the Star Trek universe that doesn't really get talked about a lot because it kind of implies the horrifying military junta nature of Starfleet, but whatever.
So obviously they're very hit or miss, mostly miss. Honestly, most Star Trek series, especially the older ones, like the first seasons are usually pretty rough. But if you had to pick one, which would you say is your favorite or best of the pilot episodes?
Wow. Because now I got to remember them all. Okay, hold on. Can we go through them real quick? Hold on. I went through them kind of slapstick, but so the original pilot to the pilot to the original series is the Menagerie. Nope, the Cage. The Menagerie was the alternate title.
So no,
that's Pike, right?
Yes, but no. So there was the original. There was the one that was aired first back in like the 60s. That was the one I think you were talking about, where Spock just screams all his lines.
Mm-hmm.
But like the Cage was the pilot that eventually got picked up for the original series. That came out, I want to say like over a decade later.
I'm just doing some Googling, and I see this picture of Spock grinning like an idiot.
Yes, he smiles. Yeah.
Uh-huh. So,
he's also in a yellow uniform.
Yeah, the Cage is the one with Pike and
yes, that's the original. That is the original pilot. Yes, that is the original pilot to the original series before they decided to go with Shatner as Kirk, and change up a couple of other things. One of the rare times when like the pilot was slightly different than the actual show.
Yeah, I will say I did enjoy that pilot. I liked it. It
was all right. Yeah, I mean it's fine if original. I've only seen so much original series, but obviously I've seen that one a couple of times, so I recognize it. So there's that. Next Generation is
Encounter at Farpoint, which I always forget that Q is introduced the very first episodes. Yeah.
Yep.
Kirk is put on trial for humanity. Picard. What did I say? Picard.
Yep.
Picard is put on trial for all of humanity in the first episode of Next Generation, and Riker joins the crew. That's pretty much that entire episode.
Sans facial hair.
DS9 is all about them realizing that the wormhole between the Gamma and the Beta Quadrant is stable, and then they have to move the station over to it at the same time that the hourglass gods of the Bajoran things are
also a 2-parter as well.
Channeling into Cisco. Yes, it is a 2-parter. That was a long fucking episode. I watched that shit as it aired back in Kansas City. Voyager is the Maquis and the caretaker station blast into the Delta Quadrant. Enterprise is this one, obviously. Let's see. Discovery. All I remember about the Discovery pilot is that for some reason Paramount Plus wants to give it to me after I watched the last episode that's available of like Lower Decks. So if I'm not paying attention, it'll suddenly start talking in that gruff, deep, like Klingon voice, because that's how that pilot opens. Is like a Klingon explaining history. I don't remember anything else about it.
So that was that also a multi-parter? Did they get to the whole like massive naval combat operation in that first pilot? Or was that after?
What, when that one Klingon ship shows up and kicks the shit out of everybody?
I mean, it was more than one Klingon ship. There were a whole bunch of them.
Wasn't there like that one big ass ship?
Yes, there was one massive flagship. But then there were a whole bunch of other Klingon vessels from all the different different Klingon clans that show up, and then throw their support behind the house of I can't remember who, and that whole huge naval engagement takes place where all the Starfleet ships get taken out. That was why Burnham winds up in prison, was because she started that whole.
I'm pretty sure
ordeal.
she ends up in prison in like episode 2 or 3.
Okay.
But I could be wrong. Yeah, I don't remember that because that one's that one's such a long arc story form. I'm having trouble remembering where that first episode ends in that story. Because it's not as episodic as the later stuff.
I'm gonna look that up real quick.
I'm gonna move on. So Picard opens up with Jean-Luc asking for a ship, and that one woman telling him to fuck off.
Yeah.
Oh God, what a dumb show. Excuse me, it is not my favorite. And then Strange New Worlds opens up with Pike bitching about the fact that he might someday be in a wheelchair.
Look, we understand you have some feelings about
Oh,
this.
you do not. You wait till we get there, motherfucker. You don't understand shit. Just lucky my wife's not on this podcast. Shit. And then Lower Decks opens up with the Second Contact, which was
Is Lower Decks supposed to be like canon?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Mm-hmm.
Oh wow, okay.
Prodigy opens up with them finding the ship.
I have not seen any of Prodigy.
What? Okay.
No, that's not true.
So
I half watched it on while I was doing something else one time.
So I know you guys have way more experience in the Star Trek universe than I do. What is Prodigy?
Prodigy is their... Oh, go ahead, Chris.
It's just like it's an animated Star Trek for kids, basically. It's like
It's newer.
Okay.
It's a CGI one aimed at tweens.
Yep. Yeah.
Liam likes it. It's fine. It's got Janeway in it. She comes back as like a hologram, but it's actually got Kate Mulgrew doing the voice on her.
Yep.
Oh, and I did just find it. The pilot for Discovery ends right after Burnham's failed mutiny. So it's when it's when Giorgio comes back and takes control of the Shenzhou right before the Battle of the Binary Stars.
Oh, okay. So Giorgio hasn't died yet. Spoiler alert.
Mm-hmm. Wow,
Giorgio's like
we just
8 years old now, so it's okay.
5 years old.
Is it only 5? I feel like it's been forever.
2017.
2017. Look at that.
What is time? Is that all the shows? Are there any other shows? I didn't watch the animated series, so I don't know. I don't know anything about that.
Oh, the old Star Trek one, yeah. No,
other than the weird Larry Niven crossover.
Is that on Paramount Plus? Are we going to watch that?
I believe it is, and I was expecting so. Yeah, it takes place during the same as the original series.
Oh boy!
Oh man, that's going to be weird.
It's not very long. There's only like 2 seasons of it.
So, which percentage of how many of those would you possibly call goods? Maybe setting the bar too high. Decent.
Boy, so the newer ones I would say are definitely like in keeping with their show. So I don't think Discovery's pilot was any worse than any other episode of Discovery. I think it was fine. I don't like Picard all that much. I have watched all of it, but I don't care for it, although which is too bad because some of the characters in there are fantastic. But the pilot of Picard sets the tone for Picard just fine. It's fine.
Yeah, I guess in that view of things, as far as it's setting the tone, I think you are correct there. It does definitely, because it's a much different tone than other Star Trek shows.
If I had to pick one that did a good job setting the pace for the show without shooting without blowing their wad immediately, which I would argue is like what the Enterprise did and stuff, Next Generation, etc. Would be actually probably Voyager. Now I like to be fair and transparent here. I liked Voyager. I liked it when I was watching it. I've liked it on a rewatch. I like Voyager.
I think you've referred to it as your favorite of the older series, right?
Of the older series, definitely. I have trouble comparing the newer series because there's such a different type of television that I have trouble deciding whether I like them better or not. But I liked Voyager, and I think that their pilot set up the show well without revealing all the stakes and shit too much, because the show's setup was pretty good. Hey, we're stuck in the Delta Quadrant. It's going to take us a long fucking time to get home. Let's get started. And that was the whole pilot, you know? The like central tension of the pilot episode with the caretakers and whatnot, that got resolved inside the episode. Mm-hmm. So after that, it was just like the fallout of like, well, we're stuck in the fucking Delta Quadrant. Let's deal with it.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
And I think that was a good way to use your first episode as like, this is set up. And because it's episodic Star Trek back then, like, here's an episode, it's complete, here's a story, but at the end of which it's setting up the rest of the show, which I think is the way to do it. And I think they did a good job.
Okay. Yeah. So that's one then of all of those, you would say?
Oh, well, sorry. I was just saying that is the one I would say is the one like that I think is the one that is standing out in my head as the best pilot in relation to its show.
Okay.
Because you asked me what my favorite was.
I know you're going to hate me for this, but I'm going to say Strange New Worlds.
So I, just as a brief overview of all of them, they're all pretty bad. If we're being honest here, I mean, Next Generation is my favorite personally. The show, not the pilot episode, because the pilot episode is bad. I like that it established Q as a character. And I know, Stanford, you're not a huge fan of Q in general, but
I do not care for the character of Q, which is too bad because I like that actor a lot. He is a lot of fun.
He is really fun.
I like that it did establish him in the first episode, and he does come back multiple times. But it was just weird. Like, it felt very original series in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the Next Generation, like, because it was like the first time they got to make a new show after, 20 years? Mm-hmm. So I feel like that episode is the writer's room couldn't decide what not to put into the script.
Sure.
Because they were so excited.
Honestly, I kind of feel like maybe even like the first season or two of Next Generation, they're trying to explain or explore a lot of the same motifs that they covered in the original series' movies.
Yeah, the first season is tough to get through sometimes when I've watched it. It's bad.
I remember watching it again and I was like, did I used to like this? And it wasn't until like season 3, maybe the late season 2 when
I was gonna say last half of season 2 it really picks up.
Picard is fucking insufferable in the first season of that show.
Yeah,
I can't stand him.
He's got to stick up somewhere.
He's
not fun.
He's patronizing. Like, he's a douche.
So they definitely flesh out the character quite a bit better as the series goes on. After like I said, kind of second half of the second season on, it gets quite a bit better.
Yeah.
But I mean, DS9, I think it sets a tone for the show, but it was just so meandering of a pilot.
Yeah, the beginning of the DS9 pilot felt like a tourist, like a tour. Like we were on a guided tour, and it was very obnoxious.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to be fair though, that whole show is a very different kind of Star Trek. Like, I feel they spend most of that show exploring like social and philosophical issues, which, don't get me wrong, every Star Trek show like steps into it at some point or another. But that was like the central part. Like, that was the heart and soul of that show. Yeah,
they didn't trek.
Right, there was no trekking.
It was stars stay put.
Even when they got a ship, they were like doing. It was like behind enemy lines of missions is what they were doing.
Which
they weren't exploring.
Was so fucking stupid as a concept. Like, you wanna say that the station's got a little ship that it needs to hold on to, whatever. But like, yes, we're gonna use some random fucking station commander and his like ragtag crew of random folks, some of which aren't even in the Federation, as like this top secret behind the lines like Defiant crew. What the fuck? God
yeah, why not?
So, Voyager, I think of the old Treks, I think I tend to agree with you. Pilot-wise, I think it did the best job of being interesting and also establishing the tone for the series and introducing characters in an interesting way.
And to be fair, I think Voyager may have been the show of that like era that kept its tone pretty consistently throughout the whole show.
Probably. I don't know. We can get into those later. The newer ones, Discovery was fine. Like, its pilot was fine. Like, it was interesting. It made me want to watch more of the show. So I guess mission accomplished.
Characters were cool.
Yeah. Now the rest of the show is another thing, but we'll get to that.
Years from now.
No, actually, no. Don't forget, it's before original series.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I tend to agree, though. I did very much enjoy Strange New Worlds pilot. I thought it was interesting. The characters were interesting, despite your misgivings about that particular theme.
We'll get there.
I think it sets the tone for the series well, and it was an interesting episode. So, old Trek, I'd lean Voyager. New, I'd say. Probably to Strange New Worlds, although Lower Decks is hilarious. It was also fantastic.
Lower Decks pilot was pretty fucking good.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think that wraps it up for our discussion topic. Do you guys have any other final thoughts to add to that?
Oh, nope. I've got all kinds of final thoughts about Strange New Worlds, but we'll get there when we get there.
All right, well, I will say this section is done. After our break, we'll be back with our we'll call it our Potpourri segment.
And we are back. So today for Potpourri, for today. So let me let you all in on a little family secret. This is not the first episode we have recorded. We recorded this episode when we first started thinking about doing this podcast, but we kind of borked the audio on it, so we had to re-record this. So we've actually got hey now, you're not allowed to make fun of my DJing. So we're re-recording this after having done like 6 episodes in the can, and we're gonna probably start actually publishing these next week. So forgive me if I keep saying like welcome back this week and whatnot, because like we've been doing this for weeks and weeks now, even if this is the first episode. But this week's Potpourri, the third section of the show is what I like to call Potpourri, which is basically like whatever the last person who hasn't done anything yet wants to talk about. And today that is me. And I want to talk about uniforms. Mama always said, go for a guy in a uniform. I did not realize what you were going to do for the deep dive, so this will feel a little similar, but I was curious where we all lied on which uniforms we liked best. Now, I'm going to go through them very briefly. Just so that we all know like what's kind of game for this little discussion. So obviously we have the Enterprise uniforms, which are like a blue kind of naval jumpsuit. The original series uniform is a strong word. It seemed like Kirk got to wear whatever the fuck he wanted, but for the most part, it was a colored shirt based on your department over top some black trousers. The women, of course, wearing skirts because it was the 60s and we can't let women wear pants. That would be scandalous. Next Generation had a semi-similar uniform, although interestingly, in the pilot of Next Generation, there is a man in a skirt. Because that was considered to be completely reasonable, although they quickly never did it again.
Yeah, not once.
But they have like a colored shirt over top of pants, and that is the same uniform that they wear in DS9 as well as the beginning of Voyager. Later in the Next Generation era movies, when they get the Enterprise E, they switch over to this. I'm not even sure what color to call it, like a charcoal blue color uniform that actually looks kind of like the Enterprise ones, although a little more futuristic.
kind of halfway in between.
Yeah, and actually DS9 and DS9 switches over to those. Voyager does not, because of the storyline inside Voyager. So that's kind of the older shows. In Discovery, we get these very sharp looking suit kind of things. And then they get weird in the future. There's a kind of an asymmetry thing going on in the future parts of the show, which I don't hate, but it is a choice. The Enterprise in Strange New Worlds has what are clearly supposed to be like throwbacks to the old ones, but somehow they're brighter. I don't know if it's just because TVs are better now, but like it feels like everyone on that ship is gonna blind each other.
Just turn off the dynamic setting on your TV. It'll be just like you're back in the original series.
It's like how the new Batmobile has a jet engine.
And I think that's pretty much it. I try to think if there was any other shows that had like a uniform for Starfleet. But I think that's about it. If I had to pick a favorite, I think it's the charcoal gray ones. Although
those are pretty cool.
I think the Enterprise ones, like from the show we're currently watching, like the blue Archer ones, I actually kind of like those too.
I think they make a lot of sense for the show, and they're pretty sharp looking.
That was what I was gonna say. Like out of all of them, just from a practicality standpoint, they're clearly the best.
Yes, they feel very much like modern day, like BDU, like battle dress uniform, or like the naval blue BDUs that the Coast Guards use. They feel very much like that kind of outfit, and that makes practical sense. They got pockets for your shit. There's not a lot of like, it doesn't look fancy because we're not trying to be fancy. We're trying to run a goddamn spaceship, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I do quite like the Enterprise. Probably the best thing that they do in the series is the uniforms. For all the reasons you listed. I do like what they did in Strange New Worlds with the uniforms. I think it was a nice, as you said, kind of throwback to the original series uniforms, but still zhuzhing them up a little bit, I guess you could say.
Right. Now, what's kind of interesting about that is the first time we get a real feel for the fact that, like, there seem to be different uniform standards at different times, even like at the same time. I think there was a line in the dialogue that like they were the first to experiment with a new uniform standard.
Right.
Which is actually, so that is interesting because like otherwise we're just under the impression that Starfleet is all in uniforms. Like all in the same uniform. But actually that's fairly accurate to the military as well. Like usually when there is a new uniform, it will get tested on like a couple of posts to see how it like kind of fleshes out and everyone likes it, and then it will be spread out to the rest of the branch. So it is interesting that like there exists in the canon right now a time where like the one ship is wearing something completely different than the other ship.
It was always kind of jarring with like, especially with the Star Trek movies from the original series. Like they go through like 3 different versions of uniforms over the course of those movies. Like you've got the stuff from the original series. You've got that like bright white set that were used in the original motion picture.
The whites were, I believe, dress uniforms, weren't they?
Oh, you know what? You might be right.
Because
and then there were the ones with like the fluffy cotton collars.
Oh yes, the original series did have a few different. Yes, I forgot about those. Yeah, they had like the single panel open and then the tunic and shit. Yeah. Because actually Picard is in one of those for a while. When he's in the academy.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot about the one panel tunics right there.
Yeah. Yeah, like if I had to pick one to wear, it would definitely be Enterprise, only because it just seems the most utilitarian and the most practical. From like just a pure stylistic choice, I would say Discovery. Like those uniforms look sharp.
Yeah.
The future ones or the first couple seasons?
First couple seasons.
Okay. The one thing I did want to also point out is like, there's this kind of interesting concept where it didn't really happen in the original show, but after that, it seemed like there was always someone who just wasn't in a uniform, even though they were kind of a part of the crew. So, like, you have T'Pol in Enterprise, right? And I guess, like, her uniform is theoretically Vulcan High Command uniform, although I don't think you see another Vulcan wearing that skin-tight onesie that she's wearing.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. I think you're right, though. I think it's
we already
because she's
discussed
not
the fan service in this.
Right.
Yeah. I think you're right, though. I think it's because she's not an official member of Starfleet.
Sure.
Or whatever they're calling it at that point.
But like all the menfolk in the Vulcan High Command are wearing like these weird bathrobe things. Is there another word for it? Because that's what fucking Sarek or whatever his name is wearing the entire time.
Jedi robes? I don't know.
Yeah. Some kind of like very highfalutin like emperor robes. And then in Next Generation, you've got Counselor Troy, who has a rank. I don't remember what it is because everyone just calls her Counselor.
Does wear the uniform occasionally.
Yes, she wears a dress uniform and stuff. But otherwise, she's just wearing like
a unitard.
An 80s like what was aerobics, like an 80s jazzercise outfit.
She may have lucked out there, though. I remember reading articles about how much the actors hated the uniforms from the first couple seasons on that show.
Oh, really?
Apparently, they were extremely uncomfortable to wear, to the point of causing physical pain.
Yeah, I went to a speech given by LeVar Burton at Penn State, and at the end of the speech, were you there for that, Rob?
Yeah, we went together.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure if you were at main campus by then.
Yeah, it started off with him going, "Okay, who's here because of reading Rainbow?" And then who's here because of Star Trek? And everyone raises their hands.
And at the end of it, he took a few questions, and one of the questions was from a guy who was in like the Air Force ROTC program. And he was like, did you all feel a pride in putting on your uniforms the same way that people in the military do? And LeVar Burton was like, oh no, we hated those uniforms. They were the most uncomfortable things anyone has ever worn. And he's the one who explained what did they call it? The Picard maneuver, where you like, every time you stood up, you had to pull your shirt down because the spandex would cling. Yeah, they had to modify them to keep that from happening later on. Mm-hmm. They used a different material, I believe, in the later episodes of the show, so that they would flow a little bit better. Apparently, they were really sweaty too. Like it was a very uncomfortable outfit.
Well, I mean, just a body wrapped in synthetic fiber. Not surprising.
Oh man. So yeah, and then in Voyager, so in Deep Space Nine, the uniforms are all over the goddamn place because some of them are wearing like Bajoran uniforms.
Right.
Some of them are wearing Starfleet uniforms. I'm not sure what Odo's wearing. I think he's supposed to be wearing like a Cardassian uniform.
Yeah, like station security left over from the Cardassians.
Right. So, but the uniforms in there are all over the place. But in Voyager, you get 7 of 9 is now not in uniform. She's also wearing the skin tight onesie because
because Jerry Ryan,
right? And I understand that 7 of 9 does not get a rank because she is not actually part of Starfleet. But once you give her a job on the ship, can you give her like a field commission or something? That's not hard to do. And y'all are out in the Delta Quadrant.
Well,
they fucking did it for all the Maquis. Like Chakotay got a rank.
I mean, you're talking about Janeway. She didn't fucking promote Kim like ever. Come on.
She demoted Paris. But in the first episode, she gave Chakotay a rank in Starfleet, a field commission, and all the rest of the Maquis.
He also was in Starfleet before, though.
Was he? Okay. But there were other Maquis as well. So, yeah. They don't do that as much in the later shows. I don't think Discovery had someone who just wasn't in uniform.
No, wasn't Saru's uniform different, though?
Michael's future boyfriend. I mean...
Book.
Book, yeah.
Book with his tiny little mouth. He has the tiniest little mouth. Every time I see him, I'm like, can you open your mouth? What are you doing? It was better when he had the beard, but when he was shaved clean.
Strange New Worlds, the one civilian doctor. I can't remember her name.
Doctor?
Yeah.
The nurse?
Who?
The nurse, yeah.
She's in a nurse's uniform.
Yeah, it's just a white Starfleet uniform.
It's just a white uniform, but it's a uniform.
Was it? Oh,
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
She's a great character. I love her.
I do like her, yeah.
What was her name?
It wasn't Ratchet, because I kept going, Nurse Ratchet?
Is it Chapel?
Right. But it's something semi-similar to that.
Is it Chapel? Did they
Chapel,
give her the
Chapel,
same name
yeah.
as the character?
Not
from
at all
the original series?
Ratchet. I mean, it's
Yeah,
two
okay.
syllables. You got that going for you, but
You're not allowed to tell me how my brain works. Oh, man. So, yeah. It's funny because, like, it feels like a purposeful choice where the writers are like, well, obviously everyone's in a uniform, but then they very purposefully put a character that is not in that uniform in the show. And I'm not sure what the mechanism they're trying to elicit there is, but it is obviously a decision, capital D, that gets made in these shows. That I find very, very interesting. Anyone else got anything on some sharp-dressed folks amongst the Starfleets?
what Starfleet footwear is like?
In Discovery, they're all wearing like sneakers, which I really appreciate. Next Generation, they're wearing like black shoes.
They look dress shoes.
Dress
black
shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I didn't
one thing we didn't talk about? The Kelvin timeline movies.
Oh yeah, they're also very bright. They're kind of throwbacks, right? And
They're modified.
picturing Zachary Quinto. Yeah, they're all right. They remind me a lot of like the Strange New Worlds ones, like just the.
Oh yeah, I'd say it's along
black.
the same.
They had those like blue and gold, more utilitarian ones in one of the movies. I liked those.
I'm gonna be honest, I do not remember.
I'll have to look up a picture and send it to you guys later.
I like their like spacesuits that they do the halo jumping in that are like that are color coordinated. Those are cool.
Yeah, those are cool.
Yeah, they're also and the women are in skirts in that movie. I don't know if there are any women in pants in those movies, but Uhura wears a skirt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we Saldana.
The one alien that they pick up who plays Beastie Boys, she was in pants.
Right, but she's not in a uniform.
Oh, you mean not from Starfleet?
No. Yeah, I'm not saying there are never panted women in the show, just not in a Starfleet. I don't know that I saw any Starfleet women in pants because it bothers me, right? Because like I get why it existed in the 60s because God forbid we have some imagination about how maybe women will not have to wear fucking skirts everywhere. But like the US military has allowed women to wear pants since the 70s.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't just let Starfleet have some fucking pants for their characters in the movie made in 2006?
No.
Or whatever that movie came out.
No pants.
So, all right. Well, that'll wrap us for this week. Thank you so much for listening. Next week we will finish up this pilot episode. I know because we're about to record it right now, and then hopefully we will be back with more after that. So, thank you, everybody. Say good night.
Good night.
Bye bye.